We went out to a place from Corner Brook, a place called Summerside on the other side of Humber Arm in Bay of Islands. There were three of us who went out, Jim Penny and Mike Foley and myself. For the Liberal Party we went in a general election, and when we got there, the school hall was jammed full of people, and we had arranged that Jim Penny was to speak first, and he was to be followed by Mike Foley, and it was to be wound up by me because I was supposed to be the good speaker. The hall was jammed, and down at the back of the school hall was a bogey stove, an old-fashioned stove, and down there, near it, was a man who had been celebrating, I think, and he had been drinking, you see. He was noticeably drunk, and no sooner had Jim Penny begun to speak than the drunk began to interrupt. Jim Penny, not being an experienced speaker, was disconcerted, and he wound up his speech pretty quickly, and then Mike Foley leaned over to me and said, "You know, Jim can't handle this. He's not up to it." He said, "I'll handle this fellow." And he went on with his Irish eloquence and got away with 3 or 4 or 5 minutes speaking before the same drunk down at the back interrupted, and Mike Foley tried to kid him and joke him and get rid of him to be quiet, but he didn't. Finally, Mike Foley had to more or less give up, and that left one speaker, and I was that one speaker to wind it up. Because I had a bit of a reputation at that time as a speaker, this drunk down at the back of the hall didn't interrupt me at first. But finally, after I was speaking 6 or 8 or 10 minutes, he plucked up enough courage to interrupt me and said something or other. I stopped dead in my tracks. And I said to him, "Oh," I said, "I thought you had left the hall. I'm so glad you're here. And now that you're here, I want you to hear a story," I said. It was a cold, raw morning, just at the break of dawn, and there was this meadow, and in the very middle of the meadow was a tree, and on the very lowest branch of the tree was a little bird. And this little bird was perched there, cold and miserable and hungry, and wondering where it was going to get its breakfast. And then, at the very lowest point, in the depths of its pessimism and despair, what should happen but that a horse should come along right under the tree and stop and do what many a horse has been known to do before, and passed on and disappeared. Now, I said, this cold, wet, and wretched and miserable little bird dropped down on the ground and feasted royally on a hot breakfast. Now the whole world looked different. That little bird, warm now, well-fed, very full and happy, flew up to the very tip-top of that tree, and full of joy and happiness burst out into song. And way up on a higher level, a hen hawk saw the bird on the tip-top of this tree, singing at the top of his voice, swooped down, seized the bird, and made off with it. That was the end of this little bird. The drunk down at the back of the hall was misguided enough to repeat, and that was the end of the little bird. I said, right, that was the end of the little bird, but it's not the end of the story. The story has a moral, and the moral is this: when you're full of shit, keep your mouth shut.